So I'm proud of him. I know, is that terrible? Anyway.
Is this Firewise?
Yeah,
Okay.
Project Wildfire.
Anyway, so you get what I'm talking
Yeah, I
about.
got you.
This is why I wake up at 3 in the morning. Yeah, like, okay, more people have got to get on their text message system. That big. Yeah, I know, it's right. The thing that you never know. And that's what this is. When I think about all the fires that I dealt with in Southern California, you know, I'd have my horses in the trailer. Was I gonna leave? Was I not gonna leave with the horses? Because you can't wait till the last minute with them. They don't have a sign. You signed.
No, just come. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Pretty sad.
I just do introductions.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. I know that's what it takes. You thought you were retired or are you retired? I thought I was too. Yeah, well, there you go.
It's just a Zoom.
Yeah, I know.
Hybrid now.
I know.
So most all
Well,
meetings
there's
are
a
hybrid.
last time
Yeah.
when I actually went around our house, I had my horses, my dogs, my cats, my kids, my two kids. I said, "Fish." Yeah. I gotta get on the, there's not lactose replacement side of what's is uses, I know when you're.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I haven't been
So
to it.
I wanna see what that means.
I've been
Part
to a
of
couple
it.
of
Yeah, I wanna see
Are you
what's going
Horace?
on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm just with him.
How's it going? So let's start with some introductions. So let's start with.
Yeah, I'm Horace Ward. I'll be your speaker today, but also glad to be a part of these meetings from Pacific Power. I'm the emergency manager there. Bend is part of my coverage area, cover all of Eastern Oregon and Washington.
Jackie Nursky, recently acquired from Pacific Power. So I work for PacifiCorp, I do all of their documentation specialists and things like that. So I'm just kind of hanging out with Horace, see what he does over here. What was your name? Sorry, Jackie Nursky. Yeah.
Morning, everyone. Erin Cullen. I'm the manager for Deschutes Soil and Water Conservation District.
And I'm Mary Ann Kramer, and I'm representing the HOA at Widgie Creek. And I'm on the committee for Firewise.
Don Kramer, I'm with her.
Good morning, Frank and Rob from Tolkien Village HOA and also our Firewise lead.
Greg Bryant, she's her Liz Firewise lead.
Patty Dara, just use county commissioner, fire free liaison.
Robin Church, Three Points HOA, Firewise coordinator, treasurer.
I'm Kevin Moriarty, County Forester.
Corinne Heiner, Fire Adaptive Communities Coordinator. And if you're on Zoom, if you could please do your introduction in the chat for me, that would be helpful. It helps me with my meeting notes. Right, and then so any updates that we have right now. We're working on setting up a meeting for, to get the dates for fall fire free. So that will be coming soon. Those are posted on those dates once we get those figured out. And
Corinne, do you think that's gonna be half price like it normally
yeah,
have to be half price, yeah, okay.
Any updates from me? Okay, so let's see. Big updates are usually just the grant ones.
everyone who received an award for the spring grant, you should have received an email with a way to upload your information for reporting. So hopefully you received that information. If you haven't or you have issues with it, please reach out to me. Again, reporting for that spring 23 grant is August 30th. I need that information by August 30th because that's the agreement we have with Oregon State Fire Marshal to have that information for them. Let's see, it's almost fall, so we do have our fall grant coming up. I think the intent would be to have the application period from August 20th till September 20th. At least that's what we're shooting for. We're gonna have an online application, so we're just kind of waiting for IT to get that up and running. So it might be delayed a day or two, but that's kind of the goal, September or August 20th to September 20th. It'll be open for a month. We have $70,000 in funding. 25 of that is from the Oregon State Fire Marshal grant we just received, the large grant. We'll be using that money for the next 3 years for this fall program, and then the additional 45,000 is from the discretionary funding that we get from the video lottery. So we'll have 70,000 in funding. That'll be very similar to the last 2 grants we had. Average awards would probably roughly be $1,000 to $5,000, you know, in high priority to Firewise communities.
So Kevin, is that 45 actually through the commissioner's allocation?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And if we need more, let us know. If we really go through that really quickly,
Okay.
and maybe we can find some more, I think.
Okay.
Maybe not through there, but you know, there's a couple options we have. We have ARPA funding that's returned, so that can freeze up other things.
Okay, that's really good to know. You know, so far, the last 2 grants, we've had more proposals in funding than we had amount of funding available. So, you know, if we do come across that again, we could.
Okay, yeah, just let us know.
Okay. We're also trying to ramp up our sweat equity program. I know that that's been done in years past. We do have a fair amount of funding for that. And when you start thinking about these grants coming up, especially this fall grant, think of, you know, if you're going to use chipping operations or debris removal or bin rentals or something like that, we can provide that service. So try and incorporate that into what you're asking for. So don't necessarily ask for money for bin rentals because we can provide that service. I think it's going to be a little clunky as we move forward on this as far as like who needs what. But I did add a couple questions to that grant application to see if people are interested in our sweat equity program. And then we'll probably do some kind of minor inquiry to see if there's anyone else who would be interested in that program. And again, sweat equity is essentially if your neighborhood has the ability to get vegetation to the curb in one way or another, we can come up with the services to either chip it or remove it. So we could either rent bins, we can haul it away, or we can do like a chipping service or something. So I think that it'll take some coordinating, but you know, that's something that we do have funding for.
Question on that, Kevin. Is
Yeah.
that county-wide or is there like landowner requirements to?
Countywide.
Okay.
We don't really have any requirements on it other than it's gonna be used for defensible space. So it's not like you're clearing your entire 10-acre property. It's,
Okay.
you know, primarily around that 30 to or 0 to 100-foot zone.
Okay.
So quick question on the Holloway service with the dumpsters. Are you saying people can get their things to the curb or we have parking turnouts in our neighborhood? And some people have expressed interest in, if only we could just put things in front of our house instead of having to haul it to a dumpster. You're saying that.
Yeah, again, this is gonna be I think it's gonna be a little clunky because each community is gonna have kind of their own way of doing things. So that part's we have to figure out a little bit, but whatever is gonna be the easiest way to remove that vegetation. If it's just taking it to the curb and then someone picks it up, you know. I can see where HOA requirements might, you know, have a restrictions on that kind of stuff, but whatever would work these days. Yeah. Courtney? I think that's really all I had. You know, we obviously have had another wildfire tragedy in Maui. I'm sure everyone's probably aware of it by now. My heart goes out to them. No one ever wants to see something like that. You know, we don't know all the details, so I don't want to speculate on it too much. All we know is there's just a wind event with dry fuels and lack of communication, and those three things line up for a tragedy almost every single time. So.
And I want to make sure everyone in this room is signed up to the Deschutes County text messaging program. If you're not, I actually a couple years ago found out I wasn't. I couldn't believe it. The Grandview fire was happening right by me. So anybody that isn't registered with that, because we don't have 105,000 people, I don't believe, registered with that program. There are people that really should be registered, and then I'm thinking like, because Maui happened in the middle of the night, but you look at Paradise and that happened in the morning. Those kids were already sent to school. And you think how fast that, when the wind is blowing, you know, remember in September of 2020, we lost 4,000 homes in Oregon because the wind was blowing so bad, 70 miles an hour from the northeast. So you want to get on that text message program. I'm gonna have see if we can get some more public service announcements out about that. People, we've got to find a way to know. We don't have sirens here, but the Maui, their sirens weren't turned on. So how is it that people are gonna find out if something happens at 2 a.m?
And the links for that are in the newsletter.
Fabulous. Okay, so good reminder. Thank you.
Yeah, so you can sign up for text alerts. So when you get emergencies like that, if you do have phone service, you will get that text alert. Okay, that's all I had for updates.
Okay, and then, so this morning we are hosting Horace Ward from PacifiCorp. He's the senior emergency management officer.
Senior emergency management specialist. We have a few of us now covering that.
And he is going to talk to us about what PacifiCorp is doing for all of our preparedness.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Right. Perfect. All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Horace Ward. I've been with PacifiCorp for about 2 years. Previous to that, I came from County Emergency Management in Yakima County, Washington, where I served as the operations manager there, overseeing all of our daily duties. And before that, I did a lot of fire fields mitigation work, worked on different crews. So it's great to hear what y'all are doing here in Deschutes County to protect your community from wildfire. Something we have near and dear to our hearts up there. We have a lot of the same hazards and fuel environments, and dealt with fire every single summer up there. So anyway, glad to be here and being able to talk with you all and see all the great stuff you guys are doing. So for those who don't know, PacifiCorp is also under PacifiCorp, which covers a 6 statewide region, over 143,000 square miles, serving 2 million customers. We have 70 of our own and operated generation facilities, from hydropower, thermal power, wind power, etc., that power our thousands of miles of transmission and distribution network across those 6 states. We cover a lot of rural areas. We also have 1,200 substations along there. But anyway, we cover a very large, not fitting the screen all the way. Oh, gotcha. Yes, okay, sorry about that. So anyway, we have a very large geographic area that we're covering, a lot of which happens to also have a lot of wildfire risk. Our emergency management program here at the company has continued to expand over the last few years. We have completed our last bit of hiring, bringing on our last meteorologist. But now we have 15 personnel in our EM and meteorology program that work daily to assess wildfire risk, drive operational decision-making, things like that. We also have the ability to have continuity on both sides of the company. If something big were to happen at our headquarters in Portland, our Rocky Mountain Power side is able to pick up the torch for us and run with that. We've structured the team and the company in a way that we have continuity in that way. So that's, again, another nice thing about having a company spread over that large of an area. Here on the Pacific Power side, we have 3 senior emergency management specialists, well, 2 senior emergency management specialists and a program manager. We all cover different regional areas and are your primary liaison for emergency response and things like that. We also have our meteorology team. Their job is to, on a daily basis, assess our risk from weather events, things like that, and we'll get into that in depth here in a little bit. If you have any questions, please go ahead and throw your hand up. This is meant to be an interactive.
So we don't
kind of-
cover Nevada then on that map?
We don't cover Nevada.
Okay.
Nevada Energy is a sister company though. We're also, I didn't know that slide in here, but we're also under Berkshire Hathaway Energy. So we have a number of sister companies across the entire United States, NV Energy being one of those, and they cover the entire state of Nevada. So just a quick review of where we are at in Deschutes County. We obviously cover 2 very large population centers here, Bend and Redmond. You can see our 2 districts here in Deschutes. We've got 70,000 customers, over 45 circuits. We've got a good amount of infrastructure out there. I also have some slides in here for Jefferson and Crick, but I feel like this is mostly Deschutes group in here, so we're gonna push on through those. Unless you want to see them.
Do you have a plan, or does the company have a plan to shift from overhead distribution lines to underground?
So a lot of underground, really any new build, especially in the wildland urban interface, are being underground at this time. I'll say we'll get into a bit of the mitigation side of what we're doing to kind of be a little bit more fire resilient, but yeah, undergrounding is a part of that, but undergrounding also poses some challenges in itself and comes at a much higher cost. A lot of what we're doing is overhead rebuilds with much more resilient infrastructure, fiberglass poles, covered conductor, et cetera. So, the reason we're all here, obviously, wildfire. As you can see, over the last 60 so years, since 1950, 61% of wildfires have occurred in the last 20 years or so. And that number is obviously only going to continue to grow. There's a very nice trend there that is going upwards, and acreage burned over that timeline. And that's obviously what's led us and everybody else to say, wow, we've got a really big hazard here, and we need to be doing stuff about it. As you can see, in every state we cover, wildfire again has continued, even in the last 20 years or so, nearly tripled in the amount of fires that have occurred. So anyway, that's why we've been doing wildfire mitigation and things like that since some of the earlier conversations in around California with public safety power shutoffs. That's where we started building a wildfire mitigation plan. A lot of the requirements came from the state to do that. And that's where we started building the program from, and it has come a long way since then. For wildfire mitigation, the biggest and best tool we have is grid hardening, right? That is replacing a lot of the stuff that's out there, especially in higher wildland fire hazard areas with covered conductor, with fiberglass or steel poles that are a lot more fire resilient, with better tools out there to both control the system and provide some protection, like non-explosion fuses, things like that to mitigate any potential from a spark coming from our system. We also have a pretty in-depth resource allocation process where we actually are moving personnel ahead of, we'll say, an event, so that they're pre-staged and provide assessment ahead of time of an event. And then we also utilize a lot more a lot safer system settings during those high wildfire hazard months and days and things like that, where the system, instead of operating like it normally does, will operate in a safer manner and again try to mitigate from any of those causes from us. We're also working on, hopefully you have received some amount of customer communication so far about our wildfire mitigation program. If not, please let me know and I'll make sure we get that information out to you.
I'm just wondering, does everyone get like a color brochure, flat color brochure saying that if there's a problem, we may turn off your power? I mean, I've received that like this one this year and one the prior year. Does everyone get one of those in the mail at their house?
Email, not print.
I get a print one from Central Electric.
Okay,
I got an email,
okay.
and a text alert.
Yeah, I've got a bunch on the way that are getting printed out to be able to hand out more, but yeah.
You can sign up for text alerts with them as well.
With them, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
You think I need another
So
alert?
another alert.
Okay.
Hey, trying to
Great
provide
idea,
the best
Robin.
information, I'll say again, coming from county emergency management and seeing how the company has approached doing customer notifications, hopefully y'all are happy with the amount of communication that comes from the company, especially when there's an outage or anything like that. You're getting texts, phone calls, emails, whatever, to let you know what's going on and let you know how long to expect potential outage to last for. But especially during, say, a public safety power shut-off event, the communication is very robust and there should not be a lack of it by any means. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. This year is polite to us. So anyway, we're also trying to amplify our communication with our medical baseline customers. Those are folks who need electricity in their homes to live. We want to make sure that we are able to communicate with those folks as well, let them know of an impending outage and have positive communication and contact with them. We'll get into that process a little bit more later. But anyway, just trying to build up those numbers. Much like you said with your county alert systems, you don't have the entire population. This is a self-sign-up kind of system, so we are only limited to the amount of people that want to sign up with the system and identify with the utility that they have medical needs in their home. With that, we're also building out our website to be a better tool for folks to find information. I know after the PSPS events last year, mapping across the board for all the utilities was confusing at best. It was difficult for folks to figure out where they fit into, especially with a number of utilities that intersect. One side of the street could be one utility, another could be the other. So we're trying to build better tools for customers to be able to really identify where they're at and what to expect. Our external coordination piece, I have been traveling since March, talking to all of the counties in the territory about this exact topic and trying to build the ahead of time relationships with all of those county partners that in case we do have an issue, here's what that communication will look like, here's what our response will look like. We've also been working a lot with tribal communities across the territory and hopefully have a tribal liaison coming on soon to have much more in-depth relationships with the tribes. And then we've also held a series of workshops and tabletop exercises across the entire territory as well. And then finally, continual refinement of our public safety power shutoff decision-making processes and activation. It's a very tough topic. We don't want to shut the power off by any means, but also want to do what we can to prevent another, an incident from happening. So with that, I mean, we're using some of the most in-depth information I have ever seen with our meteorology team and a lot of the models they're able to run, and using very precise information to make targeted decisions on that kind of stuff. Last year, I mean, we were really, they were able to forecast down to the minute to when we really needed to get to that critical point, right? To avoid, we're looking at that catastrophic fire weather type stuff when that high wind, all the fuels are dry and, it would be a catastrophic fire. That's what we're targeting for with the public safety power shutoff events.
So you cover California, and my son last year, I think the wind was like 14 miles an hour in Chatsworth, and they had their power shut off. At 14 miles an hour, I thought that was a bit low.
It's pretty low.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is dependent on where we're at, right? The coast, who gets coastal winds all the time. A coastal wind event is not as much of an issue where wind's coming off of the ocean. east wind event for them, totally different situation. All of that is taken into consideration, again, but they can handle higher winds out there. We're looking at whatever, we've looked at historical outages compared to wind events and said, this is the amount of wind it's taken for, trees to fall down, things to get blown into lines, whatever the case may be, wind that's not normal for that area. And that's when that gets there, but 14 does seem really low.
Well, what I worry about in Oregon is, I think a year ago, we had 5 trees fall in a week, and 5 Oregonians got killed by falling trees because of wind. And I drive by dead trees on the way to Sisters in the morning, and I asked ODOT about it, and they said, well, they have to study it. And I'm going like, maybe if other people besides me would call them up and say, there's a giant ponderosa that's really dead, and if the wind is just blowing right, that tree's gonna perhaps go across the road. I mean, I just think that they leave too much leeway there.
Absolutely. I've been happy to see the amount of leeway that the state federal agencies have allowed for fuels management and allowed us to be more aggressive in fuels management. If we see a hazard tree like that in proximity to our lines, they allow us to take down those types of trees, things like that. So we're able to do that. But yeah, I mean, the environmental side does play into, it does hold folks back from doing active wildfire mitigation in some instances. Where I was at in Yakima County, we weren't allowed to do fire breaks in our grass and sagebrush areas, especially on large state land properties because of endangered sage-grouse species up there. So we weren't able to really do any type of fire breaks to keep fire from entering or exiting that state land. And so anyway, a lot of things play into that.
I know.
If we had the ability to say, yes, let's do it, I'm sure we can get there a lot quicker than we are now, but as a whole. Anyway, all of that is meant to reduce the risk to and from wildfire from our system and to the community. I wanted to play this video because I think it's a really good visualization of a lot of the mitigation work that we've been doing out there. So let's hope this plays correctly. Audio. Sorry. Let me see if I can get audio to play. Corinne, do you know if I'm able to do audio off of this?
Is your sound here?
They actually topped all the junipers going down one of the roads by me.
Oh, they did?
Maybe
Yeah,
we
the
need
power
to-
company came through and they topped all of them. So they weren't in the overhead lines anymore.
They do that on my property,
Do they?
yeah, just top the trees.
Yeah.
It's gonna give us.
Well, if it comes down to it, you don't want to work. I think of course think about what they can get. So essentially, either be your back.
It's important for a utility to prepare for major events, including storms and wildfire, to keep our customers safe in the communities that we serve. PacifiCorp, over the last several years, has put a lot of effort and thought into wildfire safety, wildfire mitigation across the 6-state territory that we have, specifically identifying the areas that are of higher risk and impact and consequence.
We're making very prudent investments to improve reliability, improve the resiliency of our network, and then more importantly, to prevent wildfire risks.
Grid hardening is anything that you do to improve your system, whether it be to add technology or to simply rebuild a line, replace poles, replace wire. All of those things add to the reliability of the system.
Covered conductor, it's got a bare wire in the center, but it's actually covered in a real hard insulation. The point of it is if a tree or something were to come into the line and make contact, it would help in preventing a wildfire from starting. It can actually be beneficial year-round. From winter storms to branches being laid into the line, it'll actually keep the power on.
We're rebuilding literally hundreds of miles of lines and adding intelligent devices out into the field that will give us better situational awareness, real-time control, and information right at our fingertips so that we can react faster.
The deployment of additional field devices such as field reclosers allow us to de-energize from a point out that impacts only the necessary customers.
We can actually open or close these switches remotely instead of having to get somebody to come out in the field at one of those locations.
We're deploying several hundred weather stations across our service territory. Those weather stations are used to feed information into our weather modeling and give our forecasters better handle of what's happening in our system.
Weather is the #1 impact on system reliability, on your electric service. We are currently running high-resolution forecast models. We're creating hourly 30-year data sets of historical weather conditions. We're combining all of this with wildfire modeling software that allows us to simulate millions of wildfires every day so that we can map out the risk and the consequence of wildfires based on current forecast conditions. So all of this information allows us to better understand what's coming and where we need to focus to take action to stay ahead of those wildfire risks.
Vegetation management is ensuring that we don't have trees that grow into the power lines. It's also managing defective or hazardous trees, working around poles and making sure that we have clearance at the base of poles. And so this is a perfect example, looking up at that tree right there with the dieback that started up on the top. And typically, when you have about 1/3 to 2/3 of the tree that's dying, it's very difficult for the tree to come back from that.
So investments in wildfire mitigation live on beyond just the reduction of wildfire risk. These are investments that help the system be more resilient in the long term. Through the winter storms, through the summer wind events, these investments provide value to the customers for years to come.
Yep, I'll be there in a second. I'm just finishing up project impact.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Should be good there. As always, there will be some level of technical difficulties. Why is that not casting? All right, we'll get there. All right. Okay, we've only had a number of years of experience in this at this point, right? So, as you saw in the video, it showed a map of different high consequence fire areas across the territory, right? That was done with the initial analysis that came from California guidance on identifying high consequence areas. Since then, we have kind of gone away from that methodology. Those still they have allowed us to put about $500 million in mitigation monies into working on those portions of the system to do the grid hardening, to do the replacement of lines, things like that in those areas, install weather stations, etc. But the new process involves actually identifying which circuits of concern that have a high wildfire threat. Lo and behold, those also align probably with your WUI maps pretty well. Here in Central Oregon, we have 18 total circuits that we have identified through the research as being high consequence for us. And those are ones that are going to drive future mitigation actions, things like that. That also means currently that they have additional settings placed on them potentially during high fire threat days and advanced inspection processes and procedures. As you can see, that's 2,800 miles worth of line just here in Central Oregon to work on. That would be a significant investment as we go forward in this But know that we are out there actively looking at all of this, and especially in these areas. Hopefully you all have seen our vegetation management crews out there doing what they can. I mean, we can only operate in a certain area of a right of way to actually remove vegetation. But then out there doing that kind of work in and around our facilities here. So anyway, that's circuits of concern. This is also a daily process, which we'll kind of go through now. Any questions on circuits of concern?
The question I got is there, do you try to get people that own property next to you, if it looks like there's concern, do you try to get with them to see if you can do some mitigation on their property or not?
Those are partnerships I would love to leverage. I mean, that's why we want to integrate with our Fire Adaptive Community Coalition groups to be able to say, hey, here's the mitigation work we're doing. I know in the past, we've had a customer call and say, hey, we've got a hazard tree. It's within the realm of your guys' circuits. Anything that you guys can help us with. And if we've got kind of work planned in that area, then generally it's something that we could probably help with. But we also have some grant programs that hopefully we can work on here in the future to help get some additional mitigation work going on out there in fuels management and treatments at homes. Okay. But really what I'd like to say is this is us doing our part of the mitigation puzzle, and everybody else is also doing their portions of it, depending on who they are, what they're doing. But so you're all here today, so you all have a very defined interest in making your home as safe as you can.
I have a question. So I know I've seen on the chart where Ellensburg used to be like the #2 danger spot of this region. What's #1? Do you know?
#1 danger spot, as in
Fire.
Fire risk. I mean, Ellensburg, they have the winds, right? They get all the offshore stuff that comes into the Cascades and really funnels into Ellensburg. I can't recall exactly what the #1 area is. I know for me, the gorge, and we also cover Hood River, that area, just again due to the fuels conditions there and the winds that come in, that area is one that keeps me up at night, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, as we've seen though, areas that we weren't maybe previously concerned about, we'll use Maui as an example. When you think wildfire, you don't think Hawaii. But it can happen, especially with a specific wind event, can really take us for something and hit us by surprise, really, which we don't want to see happen.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
I read an article recently, I thought it was in the Wall Street, that PacifiCorp was shifting its strategy away from vegetation management to grid hardening and so forth.
I think that was PGE, Portland General. Yes, don't worry. It's one of those points that different, yeah, no, believe me, names are all over the place and we're separate companies, but doing the same stuff. But I mean, grid hardening is, I'll say, probably the most valuable tool to a utility, especially with the cover conductor and things like that. That stuff can take a tree into it and not have an outage. The way that the Hendrix cable's built, I have to go back to the video there, but it ends up, well, you've probably seen it on transmission lines where the lines are actually bundled kind of together and they've got a spacer in between them that helps keep the lines from slapping into each other, but it also gives them that strength that's more or less one unit. Then you add that really thick insulation over that, and they're much more resilient to pretty much everything out there. But it does come at a cost, and it's harder for our linemen to work with. But regardless, we also try to manage customer impact from increased rates, stuff like that, and try to manage the mitigation, but also be reasonable. Other utilities, they've gone with far more aggressive things, and the customer has to see that in their bill, which is also again something we don't want to. We want to be very mindful of. So anyway, that's my soapbox. All right. I wanted to bring one of our meteorologists with because these guys can explain this in so much better detail than I can, because this is what they live and breathe daily. So I will do my best to do this portion justice. But Anyway, over the last few years, they have worked to build a very, very, very in-depth weather model and risk model that they run twice daily that allow us to have circuit level detail on the risk for that specific circuit, both for wildfire risk, for weather risk, etc. And we're able to make operational decisions off of that every morning that comes all together into one big matrix that pretty much says this district is at this level of weather threat and this level of fire threat, and that drives, again, enhanced inspections, system settings, things like that daily. This is a higher resolution forecast than even the National Weather Service is using. We also have one of the largest WRF models covering really the entire half of the West United States. One of the cool things is we're able to also share this system with a lot of our other utility partners. We obviously have done a lot of investment into this, but they're also able to utilize it for their daily decision-making processes because it's all in the same area, which has been a nice additional benefit from that. All this for the wildfire risk forecast, I mean, it's looking at all the things that all the rest of the wildfire forecasts look at, but really looking at the hot, dry, windy conditions, vegetation conditions, things like that, that let us know, hey, it's dry here, it's going to be windy here, whatever the case may be, this is where the risk is at for the day. Another, besides wildfire, our next biggest threat is wind. Wind can be an important factor in a lot of things, but like we talked about, it can take that tree that is not really even close to our lines and drop a tree, 150 feet and drop right into the lines. You can have a trampoline or whatever, anything that's unsecured during a wind event get blown up into those lines. On the way in yesterday, we saw some what looked like some garbage debris in a tree very close to our lines. We passed it off to field operations to see if they can't take care of it, but certainly could have been an issue. So anyway, we are at threat of that stuff, So that's why we have looked very in depth. We took a 30-year analysis of winds and outages, laid them over each other, and identified what wind conditions are most impactful for us. So with that, each one of the weather stations we have on our system has a fragility curve. And we were able to find from that anything above the 95th to the 99th percentile, especially the 99th leads us to, we know we're going to experience outages, right? But that's like exponential increase there in the possibility of an outage risk. So each one of our weather stations actually has those numbers assigned. So on the windiest days that device has ever seen, that's when we know we're going to have wind outages, things like that. And the difference between the 95th and the 99th is where we operate and do a lot of our risk mitigation on a daily basis. We also, again, are doing advanced weather forecasting, running very complex systems out there, and have installed a number of additional weather stations, for the next slide, that allow us to see on our stuff what the weather is actually doing out there, which is a huge tool for us, right? It's not the weather station that's up on the ridge, so we're not just seeing, okay, gosh, there's 60-mile-an-hour winds up there, but down here in the valley, there's only 10-mile-an-hour winds. We're trying to base those decisions off of what's actually impacting us or what's going to impact us based off of those models. Anyway, daily, this is looked at twice a day. This thing is putting out massive amounts of data, 1 terabyte daily of weather forecast information. Quite a bit of data. We actually had to build or buy into a supercomputer cluster to even do this stuff on a daily basis like we are. So anyway, really cool, allows us to see a lot of really in-depth information. Yes, sir.
I got a question, just how quickly, once you guys see there's a problem, how quickly can it get medicated?
Oh, what type of problem?
Well, let's say you get a wind that's got you in at your 95 percentile, and you're saying, okay, now we better shut down some power or something like that.
Well, so that kind of ties into this next page here. Is those forecasts tie into a 5-day forecast. So we're generally, we're looking at the impacts for the day, but we're also looking, okay, if by Friday we're going to have a wind event or whatever the case may be there, we'll actually send folks out, we'll do assessments ahead of time, we'll do vegetation management, all of that kind of stuff. This is the tool that is driving a lot of that mitigation work on a daily basis. So anyway, I'm very real time to put in a short answer. But we're also trying to look out ahead of time and get ahead of whatever we can. This has been hugely beneficial, especially for like winter storms, right? Where there's going to be transportation issues once that storm hits, whether it's ice, snow, whatever, blocking the roads. We're going to go and we're going to flood that area with linemen from other areas that aren't going to be impacted, so that they're able to get there. They're able to start work as soon as possible, and I'd say it helped us, from what I've seen over the last couple of years, really respond to stuff really effectively, which has been nice. So anyway, it's nice having that level of detail in the forecast. And again, this is all of that work, and the data analysis boils down into that little matrix there daily for weather and fire. And depending on, we actually have a daily wildfire meeting that we discuss all of this in the morning, and that kind of sets the ops tempo for the day on where our priorities are going to be at.
Is there another question? Have you guys noticed anything, climate change, has that changed your weather looking at? Since something that happened 30 years ago isn't going to be what are we looking at today?
In which, I feel like, in the grand scheme of things, fire and these type of wind events are becoming more common. We can't really see, historic weather data only goes back to like the 1950s, so we can't really see what happened before that if it's a repetitive kind of thing. But we do see there has been a trend. Again, the next time we come here, hopefully I'll have some really good visualizations for that 30-year reanalysis we did on all the weather data, because that actually shows those. We're actually able to correlate during the day of this event, and all of the weather data that pulled into that. That is the day that catastrophic fire happened. So we're able to, I'd say more or less, look ahead at the forecast and say, okay, these are catastrophic wildfire conditions, and then we can give the context of this is going to be an event like 2020 or like a previous wind event. We can relay that context, which I think gives a little bit more. I think 2020 took a lot of us by surprise. It was a red flag day, right? It's the summer. We know that. But having an additional context like this is going to be like a once in 20-year event, I think would have prepared people a little bit more for what happened afterwards. I know that was a crazy day for us when I was still at the county, because there was fire everywhere. And anyway, that's what we're able to do with a lot of that analysis, is provide some additional detail into that. So again, I guess in the grand scheme of things, climate change has just brought a lot of these issues, especially to the forefront. But I would say there's probably a historic pattern behind how that has ebbed and flowed over the timeline. So another one of the big things that we've been doing out there is installing our own weather stations, like we just talked about, on our poles that give us a real-time view of weather on our system. The great thing is that this ties into a totally publicly available weather situational awareness website that anybody can access. That was given to us by some customer feedback 2 years ago. So we built a website where you can go and you can actually see a peak wind event. So whenever it's red, means it's going to be in the 95th to the 99th percentile. So you're able to see when an area is getting those highest risk winds, things like that. You can also go and actually see a forecast versus real time. We actually use this tool during PSPS. We'll be looking to see if that forecast is going to go. The forecast is getting us up here. The trend of the actual weather readings is also following that trend. So there's a high likelihood that we're going to get into that catastrophic condition that we're looking for. Anyway, this is a fantastic tool. I'm excited for some of the things that are going to come out of it as we continue to build it, potentially some notification capabilities, things like that. So this has been a pretty awesome tool. Thanks, Commissioner.
Oh, no, thank you. Yes. Find out about our landfill, right?
Here in the Central Oregon area, we've installed 12 weather stations to augment the existing DOT, ODF, whoever's got weather stations out here, but we've added our own again, areas that we're concerned about. And this will only continue. We've got 400 plus on the system now and hope to have around 800 by the next, in the next couple years. With that, we'll have a matrix that goes out, which that drives the response side of things, right? Usually that'll mean either changing system settings, activating response plans, changing work practices, things like that. Contacting our public safety partners, letting them know, hey, there might be a significant risk of outages today, or here's the event that we're seeing coming up just for your awareness. That's what will kick off. We'll also push personnel ahead of the storm, whatever the issue is. Generally, we'll try and bring more resources in that area so they're able to respond with a bigger workforce. For wildfire response, we've purchased a number of different pieces of equipment that help us mitigate fire. So if we're out there doing work during high fire risk days, we're able to either get on top of any type of ignition or treat an area just in case. So we have the ability to apply retardant, things like that. All of our linemen also have Pulaski's, whatever. So if there's a small start near there, they're able to jump on it pretty quickly. They also carry water bladders, things like that. And on top of that, for the work practices side, we'll only work during, we'll try to shift work to like early morning, right? So we're outside of that hazard time period when the temperature is going to be the highest. EFR, we've kind of talked about a little bit, but those are elevated fire risk settings. Normally, devices that are out on the system are going to try to keep the system on. You've ever been in your house and the lights kind of flicker in and out? That's generally a recloser, and it'll actually cycle 3 times to try and close that circuit back in to clear the fault. So a tree branch is hitting it, that creates an issue in the system. It'll try 3 times automatically to fix that and keep the power up. That's also the time when we're at most risk of sparks occurring from whatever that is, whether that's the tree, whether that's a device, malfunctioning and having sparks come from it. So EFR just turns that to, as soon as there's a fault, the device opens and we have to go out and we have to inspect that line. We'll inspect every inch of that line before we re-energize just to make sure that we're not creating a fire that we just tried to mitigate. With that, it generally leads to slightly longer outages because we have to go visually survey every span of that line to make sure that it's safe to re-energize. And then during direct fire response, we'll go, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the like black mesh that's around the poles, that's pole wrapping, or let's say, this is usually during active fires. We'll try and go ahead of it to protect as much of the system as we can. Right now we're working on like the Wildfire over in Western Oregon, in Lynn County. And so we've gone and we wrapped hundreds of poles up there ahead of the fire getting there to be able to try and protect the system as much as we can. We'll also do retardant applications and do vegetation management, whether that be felling trees or even, it'd be hard to tell in the picture, but grubbing out around the pole there so that those ground fuels can't get to the pole. And then the final thing here is public safety power shutoffs. Very controversial. I mean, could be potentially controversial concept, of shutting the power off ahead of an event coming, because we know that the risk to us and to the public is pretty great in that time. This is only looked at when the outage risk from that high wind event also correlates with an extreme wildfire risk. Fuels are as dry as they've ever been. You've got super low relative humidity. That's when these conversations start happening, is when those two things intersect. PSPS has been, I'd say, an effective mitigation strategy that a lot of different utilities have used. Last year, we got to see more or less some wins from this. We did a PSPS across multiple counties last year, and during that event, and we're talking less than a 24-hour outage, but we were able to identify 8 different locations where an event could have happened, where a fire could have started, where trees came into lines, things like that from that extreme wind event. And so hopefully we mitigated from potential 8 fires starting. So for me, that's a win, because those conditions would have been bad for all of the public safety personnel to even try to get ahead of the fires, because the winds were that extreme in those areas. we have been continuing to refine our public safety power shutoff plan for a number of years now, but have pretty much refined it down to what you see here, which is at minimum a 72-hour notification. That's when the process starts, when we have, we'll say, confidence that this weather event is going to meet that criteria that we're looking at. 72 hours out is when we're going to activate our emergency coordination center and really start kicking things into full gear. We'll be contacting our emergency management, public safety personnel, identifying what things you have going on out there, right? There's an active fire, there's a major public event, something going on. Let us know what impacts this may have to you, things like that, so it can be taken into the decision-making process. We'll also have our meteorologist brief on why we feel this is the correct decision if we go that way. And then we'll start doing the advanced patrolling and vegetation management ahead of time to try to mitigate any possibilities ahead of time. 48 hours is when customer communications start. Everybody will get a phone call, email, etc. Our medical baseline customers will get direct contact from a customer service representative so that we can confirm that they have received that message and understand what might be happening so that they can plan, since they are generally the most vulnerable from a power outage. That's when we also start doing the robust information campaigns, pushing things out to media, things like that. And we'll also start looking at our community resource centers, which is pretty much an advanced cooling shelter that we'll set up in these areas that are affected during a PSPS, where people can go to get shelter from the weather, charge their devices, get water, get information, etc. At 24 hours, and continued communication. Any of those medical baseline customers that weren't able to be contacted will reach out and talk to the sheriff's department, fire department, whoever, and see if they're able to send somebody out in person to make sure that those folks are okay, and again, that the message has been shared with them. And then as we get closer to the actual event occurring, continual communication, and then once we see the trend actually going towards the criteria, that's when we will de-energize those lines and then continue communication as much as possible, and open our community resource centers as needed for, generally we operate between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. for those, and we'll just open those up in the morning and allow for folks to come in. Yes?
Is there a way for us to tell people how to sign up for your alerts?
Yes,
And
on
to get
our
on the
website, I mean,
list?
yes, all of that is on the website, but I think in some of the flyers that I have, it also mentions a lot of that. But yeah, that's part of the messaging campaign, is trying to get more people included in that. And we've also been trying to reach out to a number of the home health services agencies across the state to get them to reach out to those folks directly, right? Say, hey, here's the benefit you might get from signing up with, not just ours, but all the other utilities also have a program like this. Outside of these events, I mean, it means that your power's, if you're not able to pay your bill, it's not going to get shut off. There's some additional things that come into play there. And just also increases communication stuff, just so those folks are aware that, hey, there's a planned outage, a maintenance thing, whatever may be happening, that they're getting communicated with. But yes, our website has all of that, but I'll see if I can't get a better link to those resources. Like I said, our community resource centers are something that we as a company have set up. They're required in California and all the other states. It's more just, we feel, a best practices type thing, but we'll bring in our logistics team, and they'll actually set up these locations. It can be a tent in the middle of the field, though I prefer brick and mortar facilities just because we have to bring in less back end services, things like that, and they're a little bit more resilient, especially because this is also probably a very windy event. As you can see, there's a number of services that are available in those locations. We're also doing active air quality monitoring, things like that, and doing air scrubbing in those locations, just so that it's a good, safe place to go to when we're not putting people in a situation where the air quality is not going to be good, whatever the case may be. I think we set up 4 of these during last year's event. They weren't hugely, it's debatable with shelters how many people actually, or centers, how many people actually go visit these, but anyway, it's still a resource for people to go to, you know, with the hope that, you know, somebody has a rechargeable device, their phone, whatever, they're able to get the information that they need, get water, get some snacks, get help, whatever the case may be.
And how are people notified of these community resource centers?
When those PSPS or communications are going out in the customer notifications, these locations are listed in there. Plus, we're also working with our county partners to share that information on social media, whatever the case may be. And then our restoration process, much like we kind of described it earlier, with the regular setting process is we'll see that the weather event has passed. We'll have our folks go out and start inspecting all those lines, clearing any obstructions, fixing any damages, things like that, and start a step restoration process from device to device. So we're energizing from the closest energized point to the next span, the next device, and doing that in an active fashion. Sadly, it's not as easy as just flipping the switch back on and getting the power back on. But anyway, depending on the length of that circuit, that could mean longer restoration time. But anyway, all that is also, I'd say, very well communicated with folks of what to expect. Restoration has begun and restoration is complete. Those are two different messagings that will go out so that people know what to expect. All right, so what's next on this? We're also putting together a public safety partner portal where our public safety partners will be able to access additional information, maps, things like that, where they'll be able to do more planning and things like that. We did a workshop here this year in Deschutes County, but maybe next year we do a tabletop and actually walk through what a public safety power shutoff event could look like, or partner and bring an outage or a PSPS event and use that as the basis for an exercise for something much bigger, whether it be additional, we did a communications exercise in Hood River this year to talk about how they would message folks, things like that. Got a lot of community partners here today, but with our public safety partners, you know, again, just identifying the concerns that they have in their areas, right? We can see where the hospitals, the fire stations, all those critical locations are during an outage. But, you know, you might have a shelter, or you might have another facility that you're like, hey, I really know about this place. We really need power on here, and we're going to prioritize that. So just having that open communication and ensure that we're aware of totally what's out there so that we can prioritize that work or help and assist in getting generators wherever the case may be out there. And then the next is just invitations to more stuff like this, of getting out and being able to talk from a utility perspective about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and bring maybe some of the challenges that we face to the forefront. When I worked at the county utilities, they provided the services. Other than that, they weren't there, and we didn't have that level of coordination and communication with them. So yeah, final note, all the mitigation work plays into the grand scheme of things. It makes the system more resilient, makes less, you know, power outages possible, things like that. With the investment that's being made, we're more resilient to not just wildfire, but everything else out there. So as a company, it's a worthwhile investment. All right, I know that was a lot of stuff, and it was quite a bit there. So please, throw tomatoes, ask questions, whatever you have. I'm just glad I got to be here and talk. Yes, go ahead.
Actually, a question concerning cameras, because I've actually seen, you know, in a lot of just media lately, you're seeing, especially California, Oregon, basically all Pacific Northwest, you're seeing a lot more reports of governmental level and also utilities installing more and more cameras for early detection, et cetera. Two-part question mainly is, one is, how many are in your service areas? And do you actually place more of them in areas that you have shown historically from your modeling and from your supercomputers that are a higher risk? Are there more cameras in those? And who has access to that information other than you? Do the emergency response at the county level?
I mean, so we have in the Alert Wildfire program, which is a publicly accessible platform. We own a few cameras that are in that system. Right now, we're actually piloting with another system called Pano AI that provides artificial intelligence-based detection of wildfires 24/7, brings really nice 360 cameras, and depending on how they're deployed, can triangulate exactly where that fire is at, and then once the IA system notifies that there's an issue, it'll actually go to like their dispatch center. They'll verify, okay, this is definitely a hotspot, whatever the case may be. They're gonna push it out, and that's when we and our public safety partners get notification of something. So anyway, we're piloting that with building on that, but I think really where we're trying to go is as more of a partnership with the state agencies, especially to have statewide approach to the whole thing instead of just installing them where it makes sense for us, but making sure that, you know, whatever we're partnering on, I mean, those cameras are significant investment, especially with, you know, the ongoing management costs of those things. And you're gonna pay for the communications plans, all that kind of stuff. Want to make sure that we're doing it in an area that makes the most sense and is the most beneficial to not just us, but all of our partners out there. But anyway, I'm excited to see what that'll look like. I mean, Oregon has a pretty robust network of those cameras. California, obviously, they've kind of been paving the way in a lot of that and have a lot of them up. But it's great seeing those conversations continue and move into all of the territories. So anyway, hopefully that answers that. But yeah.
We have a question in the chat. David Mormon says, you've described an impressive list of mitigation and adaptation strategies Pacific Power is currently implementing. Would you please discuss to what extent these strategies were already in place in 2020 and to what extent have they been added afterwards? That would be helpful in understanding potential effectiveness.
Certainly, in 2020, we did not have, we were using a meteorology contract group that was providing kind of a meteorology assessment, and then we're making decisions off of that. We didn't have an EM team at that point. We didn't have our own dedicated in-house meteorological experts that are looking at our stuff. We had PSPS plans for California and some other areas, but elsewhere outside of, again, we're working off of the guidance that we had at the time. And then after 2020, saw an obvious gap in what that looked like across the entire territory. That's why we've taken a much more aggressive stance on identifying those areas and creating plans and mitigation actions there. Hopefully that summarizes it in a short enough term. I'm sure we could talk about it for a long while. But yeah, I mean, I'll say on a personal note, I mean, you look at Maui and the potential that there could have been some utility their involvement there. Having plans to mitigate during those types of events is not just a here issue or a local issue, but every utility across the United States should have a plan for identifying these type of events because it can happen anywhere. Again, you know, we've seen coastal fires, right? You would think the Oregon coast would be a place that you'd have the ability for a fire to come and impact communities, but with the right event and the right conditions, it certainly can. So having those plans in place, that's going to be the best way forward from what I see.
There's another question, comment, wondering about current power outage in Deschutes River Woods. Wondering if this is having to do with controlled outages for wildfire.
No, it is not don't believe that is well, it's not a pre-planned outage, or else those communications would have gone out. Again, in our plan, we say 48 hours is when we're going to begin customer communications, and I mean, that's what we have submitted, so that's what we're shooting for. So if it were the case that it were a pre-planned event, there would be significant communications, and I probably wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at our emergency coordination center, making sure all those things are being hit at the right time and having those conversations. But yeah.
Ellie is just to ask that question, says thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Awesome, sir.
Yeah, from what I understand, and all the fuzziness of weather forecasting, wind conditions are maybe one of the more reliable. You know, they're pretty accurate. They predict them ahead of time, a lot of times the intensity and everything. I mean, the big fire the Labor Day fire that happened over on the other side of the hill, they knew it was coming. I mean, they didn't realize how catastrophic it would be. So a lot of the big fires, especially the ones that have that have wiped out communities have been weather events, really. And I'm happy to, hear your reporting on what you're doing to mitigate, from the power company point of view. I'm in South Deschutes County, it's Mid-State Electric, and I understand that they're being pretty proactive as well. Because we have a history of like tort law where you have to say, okay, who's at fault, right? You always got to point the finger, who's at fault. Right now, we're in a weather advisory, we're in a fire advisory right now just because it's really dry and hot. And if wind comes up, that's obviously complicated. But it could be anything that starts the fire. Historically, it was lightning, but most of the fires are human caused one way or another now. So, and in Maui, when I was looking at some of the news on that big event, and one of the first things I heard was we've got to start suing the power company before they even knew what the origin was of the fire. It could be, could be anything that starts a fire. And that applies to us here too, somebody doesn't put out their campfire or something, and it affects thousands of people. So in these major fires, how much of the time have they originated with the power lines?
So it's a far smaller percentage than human cause from wildfires, train dragging, whatever the case may be, and lightning. But it's a problem we're all seeing across the board. Doesn't matter where you're at. The infrastructure is inherently vulnerable to wind, vegetation, etc. And so that's why I think all utilities, wherever there's a potential for wildfire, have to be looking at what can be done to mitigate from them having something be caused by them. But we're also a corporation, so people want to go where the money's at for liability's sake, things like that. So understand the other way.
So speaking of corporations, you're part of Berkshire Hathaway, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so is Burlington Northern
Yes.
Railroad that goes through significant parts of our geography here in Central Oregon. So do you have any understanding, or do you do any collaboration with Burlington Northern? Because there's areas along the roadway, along the railroads that need to be mitigated.
I will say I've heard that conversation quite a bit from partners and things like that, but we don't have direct interface with them. We're under Berkshire Hathaway Energy, so we only work with other utility industry folks. But
you can
at a Berkshire Hathaway level, I do believe there's guidance being pushed to the many companies that are under that umbrella, that they also need to be looking at ways to mitigate those risks. And again, I'll just say from personal experience, it's nice to see that there's push from that higher level to actually do work and make the investment in it.
And does Burlington Northern have a similar emergency?
They have an emergency management program. Again, this is just my dealings with them from the county, is they do have an emergency management program. They do have firefighting assets that they can deploy via railway, things like that. But I can't speak to their mitigation plans, efforts, etc. Is it?
Was it BNSF? So again, in South Deschutes County, the rail line goes near a lot of the communities, and they've been pretty good to us, Upper Deschutes River communities, and we've gotten more than one grant from them for wildfire mitigation on private properties. And it's, they're restricted grants. We just got another one. I think it's $5,000. It's not huge, but so within, it's a restricted grant. So it's like properties that are within 2 miles, I think, of the rail line, and they're helping us. They're helping us actually create a fire mitigation in those areas. And then they're also working along the line too, because they recognize that, especially with the railroads, they throw off sparks.
Right. Well, we were just having a conversation before the meeting started about it.
Yeah, I was
and its
gonna
impact
report on that when we did,
Riverwoods.
when we did our roundtable, I was gonna report on that, that we just got a small grant from the BMSF. So, yes, they do. They, you know, they're aware of it and trying to help.
Great to hear. Any other questions for me?
I just, one, so, you know, thinking of this week in particular, it's really timely for you to have this presentation. Yeah, you know, we're probably in the heart of wildfire season right now. I mean, I don't think we can get any more into it than we are right now. It's very dry out. We have excessive heat warning at this point. I don't think we're in red flag. I think the west side is in red flag warning right now. So that usually is a wind related mechanism to trigger that. So I'm assuming all these things are kind of figured out when you're thinking of what to do with the power, you know? So if you're in excessive heat warning, hot, dry fuels, but you haven't hit that wind trigger, is that where you're starting to think of making that power? I can't remember exactly what slide, but you showed how that power is at least less vulnerable, at least from lines hitting each other or something. You make it safer essentially. But how does that work when you're getting into a point where the energy use is a lot higher right now because of air conditioners and things like that? And so you have these conflicting issues.
That's more or less a whole separate conversation. That's a grid management type thing where we're talking the whole Western connected grid here. For us as a company, I say luckily we have a lot of generation resources, but those things are looked at like every minute by our grid operators of contingencies of if a certain line goes down, where can we shift the load, things like that. I'll say with the most recent, I mean, the heat we're experiencing this week, especially in, you know, Western Oregon, where they're not used to that, so they are going to be running far more stuff and potentially have more load in the system. We were not near or at worry of hitting our peak demand where we'd have to potentially do some load shifting and things like that. As far as the deconfliction between PSPS and that kind of stuff, I'd say all those conversations are going to be had in our, you know, emergency coordination calls and with our public safety partner calls, just to talk what that could mean. I mean, obviously, if a certain area is without power, but it's also a massive heat event, those folks are not going to, they're going to be without their air conditioning, et cetera. So those are the things that are taken into consideration there.
Yeah. So if you do have to reduce power or even potentially shut it off, that's where these centers might be.
Correct. Yeah, that's they're meant to be, you know, targeted and located in those areas to best serve that that area that's de-energized. So yeah, but also community resource. I know at like our Sweet Home, we had a lot of different folks from the community that were showing up there. It's not like we're verifying that you're a customer of ours. It's open to anybody that's going to come in to access water, cooling, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah. And then the wind would probably be the real thing that kind of would trigger towards that shut off. I mean, at least
correct. Yeah. I mean, if the wind's not there, then the risk of utility caused issues is much less. I mean, the fire threat's still there.
Yeah.
That there could be a fire, but you know, that spread component isn't quite there. But yeah. sorry, lost my track there.
Yeah, it's just, it's interesting to see what California has done with some of these blackouts and these shutdowns. And obviously not everyone is gonna support or, oppose it, but it seems like we've done pretty well so far. Hopefully, hopefully we do get that east wind event like the 2020 fires, that we've learned from what's happened in the past, and we can prepare 5 days out, 4 days out. Everyone's kind of know about it.
With the forecasting that I've seen, and just, we're also continuing to work with the Weather Service, the GAC, things like that, to, help them with some of the stuff we're able to provide, understanding the risks a lot more and make appropriate decisions at their levels. Luckily, east wind events have not been super prominent here in the east side. It's usually those downslope winds after it gets over the Cascades that really funnel that stuff and make it that much more aggressive. But yeah, we'll keep continuing to keep our fingers crossed that we don't have those issues here east of the Cascades.
Yeah.
And why is an east wind worse?
It's not normal. We're usually getting the coastal winds that are blowing in. So the vegetation is more used to, we'll say, that amount of force coming from that direction once the east winds come in, and they can be a lot more intense. And again, just the way that they hit the Cascades allow them to kind of work as like a jet stream in some of those areas and bring way higher winds than they've experienced normally there.
Yeah, it's very similar to like your Fern winds or Santa Ana winds.
Yeah.
There's lots of events we generally are in the fall, but it dries out the fuels as it blows, and it's usually like a really high velocity as well, that combination.
We had a presentation here at Project Wildfire a while ago from a weather aspect to it, and he was talking about that big the Detroit fire, which is east kind of wind, and he said that the jet stream is doing, I don't think I'm quoting here, the jet stream was doing wonky things, and it created a condition to where there was a strong wind from the east, which is really unusual. And like Moriarty was saying, it's like the Santa Ana winds in Southern California. So if it's coming from the east, east of us, it's badlands and desert and stuff. So it's really hot and dry, and that would be one of our worst conditions too. Also, we're buffering, as a strategic thing, we're buffering areas on the west side, say of Bend. They've been doing lots of work on the west side, but because historically we get the prevailing winds from that direction. But there are occasions when it's not. And some of this stuff just depends on, there's all these micro regions and stuff too, as far as like the capacity of the grid. In my area, in South Deschutes County, Midstate says that because we're like a cold zone, the high energy usage is in the winter. And so in the summer, they're like way below what their capacity is. So, but the wind is always the big booga, I think.
I never totally understood it until one of the meteorologists showed on a global view how that jet stream is changing. Something in the Pacific hits that jet stream and destabilizes it, and then it goes much further east and then comes in again over those hot, drier areas. And anyway, next time I'll try to bring one of those guys here and they can show you some really cool visual stuff if you'd like. They've done a really good job of explaining it in simple terms that I can understand. So
I think that they've recorded most of these project wildfire meetings for a while, and I don't know if Corinne, I don't know how far back they go, but people could probably, even you could probably look at that presentation That was really interesting. The guy was very knowledgeable. I don't know if anyone else here recalls that, but that was great.
I clearly missed it.
Because weather is, I mean, if we're talking about fire adaptation for communities, weather is the thing that is always the wild card.
We built a heck of a meteorology team. The manager for that team came to us from San Diego Gas and Electric and dealt with those winds and fire events down there and helped build up their entire program and resiliency. So we were happy to get him on our team, and that's also led to some other experts in the field. Our principal meteorologist, he came to us from the GAC world, from 25 years of fire weather experience. So anyway, I think we've got a pretty well-rounded team there. So again, put a lot of trust in the fact that they know what they're doing to help us get ahead of things and operate in the safest fashion we can, and also keep the power on. So anyway, yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
that.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really informative. So we only have a couple minutes left. I don't know if there's anything important anyone wanted to share.
I have a question. We're gonna have a cleanup in a couple weeks in our area, a debris cleanup. And is it important to have the volunteers in the community sign a work release form before that work is done? So there's no liability to the HOA? Have you had any of that come up? Anything that has been done about that?
We
We
haven't done that in our community. We have, your HOA probably has carries insurance.
I
And
was gonna say the
liability.
same thing. Usually the liability,
Liability
HOA's
insurance
insurance, you're
should
you're
cover it.
covered.
$1 million or something like that.
Of course, I mitigated that, like I led the cleanup, we just did a cleanup last weekend, I led the cleanup, I was the only one that got on the roof of the house, so that's how I mitigated it. Cause most of
We don't
my
get on
volunteers are in their 70s and 80s, so I'm like, I'll be the one on the roof. You all stay down here.
We are not doing roofs at all. They won't allow us on them. So our insurance may be limited. But I was just curious, I remember when this first started years ago, I was on a committee and they wanted volunteers to sign a release form. But I was just curious if that's necessary anymore.
Check with your, check with the HOA's, whoever manages your HOA, check the policy, but typically your policy absolves the HOA because it's under the HOA, so usually it absolves you of any responsibility, but
Oh, okay.
Some good sense though, like, I had eye protection and told people to be careful and made sure that they didn't do anything too crazy.
Cut their
so-
finger off or something like that, yeah.
In the long term, I mean, if something did happen, a piece of paper, a release is not going to provide you with any type of protection.
Okay.
If any of your homeowners
Anyway.
are lawyers though, they'll
Yes.
scare the hell out of you.
Well, there are several lawyers in
They'll
here.
tell you you need to do all kinds of things. Oh, and Kevin, I did wanna just do a little shout out. One of the things that I did this summer is I actually contacted an ODF forester to come out and specifically to look at, we have 16 acres of mature ponderosa and juniper, and I just wanted to kind of know from an expert what our overall health of our whole community was, because we live in Tilcomb and Old Farm, and we're in a very sort of like it used to be unincorporated area, so it's tons of mature trees, and a lot of homeowners have been contacting the HOA asking us, they were concerned about the health of the trees, just overall drought, fire risks, et cetera. But I just like to give a shout out to them because it was a great resource, because he came out and we toured the whole property and he taught me a bunch of things and gave me kind of a report card of the overall health of our neighborhood. Not any houses specifically, but just generally sort of a 30,000 foot view, so to speak. It was a really, really informative kind of visit, and it was a great tool to kind of like let homeowners know how we're doing in that respect. And also just for us, looking long-term at the overall health of our neighborhood, because we're trying to think long-term. The mitigation efforts we're doing now are great for right now, But also we want to look ahead in the future because we have a lot of younger families living in our neighborhood, and so the dynamics are changing. And we plan to be around for decades more, so we want to make sure all those beautiful trees that people move there for are still going to be there. So I want to give a shout out for the county and having that resource, because one of our previous meetings here gave me that link, and I went there and gave him a call and we set it up. So
great.
it was great.
Did you pass the test?
Oh, yeah.
Who came out?
Where's his name? His name escapes me at the moment. He was a younger guy.
Ross or?
Yeah, whoever on the ODF
Ross
site, whatever this Central Oregon Region's forester is, he's the guy that came out.
Ross, that's right, Ross.
Yeah, that sounds like him.
Yeah.
That was a great
No,
tool.
that's great. Yeah, because fire fuels, forest health, they all kind of blend together.
Yeah, a lot of the as far as our forest stand, the trees are becoming drought stressed, especially in the areas where it's overstocked. And, that increases, everything's upping up.
I think you'll see more of that.
All right, thank you everyone for attending today. And Horace, if you could share those slides with me, that'd be great, so I can put them in the follow-up.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Oh,